Welcome to live episode 2 of World Blockchain Capital with my good friend Larry Gilheeney. He has like 20 different titles, so I'll let you introduce yourself, Larry.
Hey,
Take it from there, bro.
hey, Mike. First off, super happy to be here. Thanks for having me. Congratulations on the new show. I could not be prouder of this effort. You and I have been buddies for a long time, and you're making great things happen, and you're bringing great messages to people. So, congratulations on the new show. Yeah. So, hey, I'll be happy to talk about
What?
me. It's my favorite topic,
I
right?
know.
So, hey, Larry Gilheeney. I run a series of nonprofits based on freedom, right? So my main gig is at an organization called the Rhode Island Center for Freedom and Prosperity. And we get some people watching this probably right now on the Ocean State Current. The Ocean State Current is our blogging and commentary website. So we do journalism there, we do news, all kinds of great stuff happening there. At the center, we do public policy. So I'm always talking to legislators, trying to build out a more free, more prosperous ocean state. I'm on the board of an organization called the Gas-Free Project, which does political activity here in Rhode Island. And I'm Northeast Director for America's Future, which is an organization that develops leaders. You're a member. You're one of our best members. So really
And
happy
by
to
the
do
way,
that.
just a side note, thanks for letting me write articles for the organization. That really helped out a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Check it out, americasfuture.org. We got stuff on the blog. You're one of our great writers. We're always looking for more content. And I'm here to talk about freedom, man. That's what I do.
An amazing gala, by the way, last month.
Hey, you were the life of the party down there. Those pictures were awesome. It was a really great time. Yeah, some really cool masks going. It was a great time.
So, in your perspective, like, what's the definition of liberty and freedom?
Yeah, great question. It goes to like a really fundamental principle about what we are as human beings. So we have to start by recognizing the dignity of the individual, right? And the limitless potential that each and every person has. So freedom is about getting out of the way and letting people be prosperous and reach their potential on their own. So there's lots of people that don't like freedom, right? There's all kind. If freedom was, it's the most powerful thing in the world, but there's
So, sorry, before you continue, who doesn't like freedom specifically?
well, the left, right? That's really what it comes down to in America. There's lots of forces in America right now that want to restrict our freedom and stop people from achieving their full potential because they want people to be dependent. And that's a really bad thing.
Okay, so I have to ask you this because it's kind of the topic of our overarching like thesis for our channel that we're trying to develop. So, how does like cryptocurrency and decentralized blockchain platforms fit into freedom and
Yeah,
liberty?
yeah. Another
You
great,
know, you can just give a short answer, a long answer.
yeah, another great
Yeah.
question, right? So it goes back to that fundamental principle about the dignity of the person, and the blockchain is this revolutionary technology that there's never been anything like it before, where you can own something digitally, right? That's really what it comes down to. The blockchain on this fundamental level is this truth machine, right? So the blockchain is fundamentally true, and it's something that's permanent online in a way that there's never been before. Because before, your data was in a server. It was something that somebody else owned, and property is fundamental to freedom. So that's really what it comes down to, and it's a great thesis. It's a great topic for the channel. Mike, I got a question for you. What made you start all this? This is really cool.
Oh, basically, I was really interested in blockchain and cryptocurrency, and you specifically were like, "Hey, you can write articles for AF," and I was like, "Let me start writing some articles." So I started doing some research, and I was like, "Oh, well, I think I'm pretty good at this now. So let's see if we can transfer this over into YouTube Shorts." So we started doing YouTube Shorts, and then today I was like, "Hey, let's do these few episodes." Well, not today. We did it today, but we planned it out a month
Right.
ago. Thanks, Adam, producers as well, and for organizing all this and the amazing studio as well. So we have all these resources. We have app, we have this organization, we have group chats. So I decided that hey, let's start a channel on cryptocurrency and blockchain because as we get close to the 2024 election, it's becoming an increasingly big topic, as I predicted in one of my articles in November. And
Go check that out, folks.
definitely, and we're gonna have a big bull cycle. Well, bull cycle is when prices increase dramatically, and it's going to attract a lot of people to the space. And a lot of people are going to be confused about, hey, what is cryptocurrency? What should I invest in? And obviously, I'm not a financial advisor, can't give financial advice, but I can give people educational, just
Right.
top material on just basics, how to understand it in a simplistic way. But my articles focus on taking complex topics. For example, what is blockchain? A lot of people are like, oh, blockchain is technology, hashtags. I'm like, listen, imagine a car, the engine in the car. Bitcoin is the car, blockchain is the engine. That's what I do.
That's simple. And it's transformational, right? Because people actually can own it, and that gives them the freedom that they need to be successful with their own lives. The problem is that the monetary policy of the United States right now, it's inflationary. They're dumping more money, and we saw that during COVID, and it really takes away the value from the dollar, right? I mean, I'm sure your first guest is much more of an expert on that than I am. I'm kind of more here to talk about like the philosophical level of what this means for the world, right? So I think that there's a moment of change that's coming. You know, we're seeing that coming up in the election, as you kind of hit on, that there's going to be a lot of interest in this coming up, and it's going to be really big for people. So more people should be watching stuff like this and getting involved and understanding things. That's why we have the series of organizations that we do.
So change. I'm assuming you're talking about populism, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, you know, it seems like it's a populist moment. There's lots of people out there that are very angry with the way that things are going in government. We've seen that the last 4 years, and really the last 4 years before that, and all the way back to, you know, probably 9/11 was the big moment where things changed in America, and that there's been this outgrowth of people that are, you know, regular everyday people that are upset with the way things are going, and the answer really for them is more freedom, right? I mean, that's really what it comes down to, that people need to have their limitless potential. No one's standing in the way of that from happening, right? I mean, that's really what it's going to come down to, and that's where we're at now in the world.
So populism. Let's stay on that topic. So
Yeah, sure.
we've seen the populist revolution in a lot of countries, specifically right now. I think at CPAC, where we were, I was a few months ago. We saw Javier Milei and President of El Salvador. What do you think of El Salvador changing from just having the because their currency collapsed like a few years ago, right, or a decade ago or something, and they were like, hey, we have to use the U.S. dollar, and they're like, we need to reduce our dependency, so let's have Bitcoin and USD. And I'm sure you know this, but like every business in El Salvador has to accept Bitcoin.
Right.
So you know, obviously it's a country that's developing. It's going through a lot of growing pains, so you know they're going to have issues with it, but eventually they will be able to accept Bitcoin as the same as they use U.S. dollars. What do you think about that and how that bodes for the future of the U.S.? I'm not sure if you think that could happen in the U.S. or how that would happen, but first, what do you think of the populist revolutions in El Salvador, Argentina, et cetera?
Yeah, so first off, as a libertarian guy, seeing that election, it was an amazing thing, right? I mean, this is the big moment, and he's gone in, he's fulfilled his promises, and you see the crowds, you see the people. I actually had two good friends. One of my buddies, Nikos, he's the Southeast director for America's Future. He was down there during the election.
Argentina, right?
Argentina.
I remember you told me that.
Right, yeah, he was down there. He was down there during the election. It was an amazing thing to see happen. It was super, super cool. Yeah, so talking more broadly about the developing world, right? So it was, I think that they get to skip ahead, right? So I think that the blockchain, you know, this technology, it's like cell phones, right? So they don't have to put in landlines. They can skip ahead. This is the same thing. They can go right to the cell phones. No need for all these telephone wires. They're putting up the towers. Can it happen in the United States? It's going to happen in the United States. There's no way this won't happen. It's just a question of when and how much resistance we're going to get before it happens, right? Because there's always the enemies of freedom, like I said at the beginning as we started talking, right? There's all these people that don't want these things to happen because they want more dependency, and that's not the answer for people. The answer is that really that we need less dependency and more freedom to make things happen. But it's going to happen. I believe that fundamentally.
It's crazy because, you know, Singapore, I lived in Asia for 10 years almost, and Singapore went from a very, very poor country to like one of the wealthiest per capita in the world, and I see El Salvador becoming like the Singapore of the West.
Hey, I want Rhode Island to be right.
Listen, both of us have worked on this, right? Yep. I talked to people at the state level, different politicians, people that are appointed, Secretary of Commerce, et cetera. You talk with, you know, you're a lobbyist as well. So I think that we're doing what we can to have Rhode Island become that superpower. And as it is, the way the laws are written, hey, this is in the perspective of the governor's office, this is the world capital of cryptocurrency and blockchain. We have to promote that message. This is the reason why I want to do things like this. World blockchain capital. What does that really mean? Well, we're decentralized. It means anything. Right. But the idea for it did come from Rhode Island.
Right. This may surprise your viewers, Mike, but I'm very critical of Rhode Island government, but I really want to compliment them on this. They've really put the effort in. They've spent a lot of time discussing this. I know you've been working with them closely. They've been sending people out to our events and really having a great discussion on this. And I'm really hopeful for the future of this, right? So this is something that is a chance for Rhode Island to be on like the cutting edge of what's happening. And like you said, world blockchain capital, like this could be anywhere, right? It doesn't matter, right? That's the beauty of the new world is that, hey, the internet is this massive continent, but it's everywhere at the same time, right? So that's that, right? So this is like a chance to reimagine the future in a way that I don't think that there's been, at least since the founding of the internet, right? And I think this is really the next step. This is what's all going to be about.
Hey, we're doing what we can, right? You talk to people like that run different blockchain councils around the country, mention Mike Reyes or America's Future, Larry Gilheeney, they know our names. You know, when people ask, hey, who's out there around that we can work with? Private citizens. You know, you get things done. Populism, libertarianism through the private sector,
right?
Not the public sector.
Yeah.
Or best case scenario, public-private partnerships.
Mike, you and I have been active all across the place where there's the most people in the Northeast.
And we travel all over the country.
Yeah, we're traveling all over.
Vermont, Florida. I mean, we've been like 7 different states. I'm sure that's
New Jersey, New York. We're doing all kinds of stuff in all the places where all the people are.
And by the way, for the AF viewers, we still have to talk about pizza and who has the best pizza. I personally believe that Rhode Island can compete. Hey, I don't want to diss New Jersey. I don't want to diss New York or Connecticut. But Rhode Island can compete.
So I'm a thin crust guy, right? I mean, that's fundamentally, I'm a thin crust guy.
Chicago pizza's not pizza, right?
Yeah, no, 100% not pizza at all. That's like a lasagna, maybe. There's too much cheese, too much sauce. If it's thick crust, I'm not in. Rhode Island pizza, it's its own thing onto itself, right? I mean, it's different. There's the party pizza is different than regular pizza, but you can get a great slice all over the place. It's the great Greek influence here, but thin crust all the way.
Definitely. So going back to AF, so we're going to these different places. Remember that we on Twitter I shared one of the articles. It was a joke article, meme coin mania, a love-hate relationship. I was like, hey, let's do this, and that got like 20,000 views. But the thing about that is not just ourselves and reshares from partners and other organizations on X, but what I really liked about that is that we have all these platforms right now where we can make things like this, and people are actually interested.
Yeah, we're developing a movement, right? I mean, that's really what it comes down to, and it's about reaching out and having these conversations one-on-one and with the digital audience at the same time, right? So we're having all these great conversations. We're building these relationships. I think it's really going to be transformational to make these things happen. But it takes a movement, right? Because like we said, there are the enemies of freedom out there that don't want these things to happen because of dependency. But we put in the time, we put in the work, and regular people can make a difference getting back to that populist moment that we're in, right? So if we can find the people, we reach them, and have great conversations, have a little fun doing it with some pizza and some beers, it's a really cool thing, and maybe even a little whiskey, why not?
Okay, so, whiskey. I love whiskey. I'm just saying personally. No, by the way, peanut butter whiskey. Some people know what we're talking about. We won't talk about that right now.
Legendary stuff, folks. You really, peanut butter whiskey has been transformational to the blockchain movement across America.
Hopefully, we'll have some at the event Sunday. You want to promote that, or?
Yeah, there's a great party going on this Sunday at Lippet House in Providence, Rhode Island. Our good friend Will's hosting. It's going to be a great America's Future crowd there. So hey, go on our website. You can find out some more information there. But yeah, show up, have a great time. We got some drinks for everybody.
So this is going to be another controversial topic. So my personal opinion is how I look at it. In the West, we've had this concept of like, hey, we have a king, and the king is God's right-hand man, right? Or queen, right-hand woman. And in the East, they have more so like the emperor. Like he's the emperor in heaven and in earth. So do you think that the way we view freedoms in the West is different from the way they view freedoms in the East? For example, communism in the way it versus China, it was never able. People have tried. We've had communist parties. We hardly all go, but different organizations. Well, they've tried to implement communism here, but do you think there's a reason why specifically they couldn't, even in the West, why they could do it? They couldn't do it here, but they could do it in, for example, Venezuela or Cuba.
Yeah, 100%. This is a great topic. So the Eastern tradition, Confucianism, the emphasis is on the relationship between different members of society, right? That's one of the big differences between the West, where it's the individual that's supreme, and like you said, right hand from God, right? That got transferred, and then we all became like the right hand of God. That's kind of like what the individual sovereignty is about, right? The rights come from God to me, not to the king to me, right? That's kind of the big transfer that happened during the American Revolution, and that spread to the Enlightenment. Amazing thing, right? Because it recognized something fundamentally true, the individual dignity of each and every person. In the East, Confucianism, different that's value set. And I do think that's why communism was so easy to set in communist China, because of that different fundamental level of understanding of the relationship between different people. And also, Buddhism has some different ideas about what people are, right? The idea of Buddhism is that, you have to escape reality. Now, there's some truth in that, right? I mean, but that has to do with, there's like an anti-humanism.
Right? Also, escaping reality doesn't pay the bills. Just
right, exactly. Exactly, right?
Continue.
Yeah, so, I mean, fundamentally, the West is based on Christianity and Judeo-Christian values, and Christ is the individual, and his sacrifice is what is the fundamental level of the spirit of the West, right? So that's one person making a sacrifice, and we all have to kind of follow that story in our own way.
So, I'm the West. Our difference from culture to culture. We talked about East versus West. how about Eastern Europe versus Western Europe? We think this is fundamental. Obviously, we have different alphabets, structures, different languages. Just philosophical thinking here. What do you think?
I think it's probably more political, right? Because Russia's always trying to copy Western Europe, right? That's always the goal. But then they're also very stubborn about it. Like, oh, we want to be different, but we're also the same.
Because they're like Asia and Europe,
right? Yeah, it's kind of in the middle, right? And it's also how ideas spread. So they're influenced by both at the same time. So I think it's probably more political that, hey, Russia wants to be supreme and the West wants to be supreme, and that they kind of fight amongst themselves. And that's kind of the difference. I don't think it's as much culture, because it's not as stark of a difference, but it's probably more comes down to like the politics of it and how that transfers into human existence.
So let me phrase this in a way that's not too bad. Okay, so I met a Cuban refugee. He believes in freedom. However, he did tell me, listen, if you're in a public place and COVID is spreading, you should wear a mask in order to protect your fellow man. You should take the jab in order to protect your fellow man. I think that he actually made a point to an extent because, like, hey, your rights end where other people's rights begin. What would you say to somebody like that? That's like, hey, the jab and the mask is not for you; it's to protect others from your germs.
Well, yeah. So I mean, listen, you can't hurt anybody else, right? That's a fundamental thing that we recognize that,
Yeah, but there's a difference between stabbing somebody, shooting somebody, and wearing a mask.
Right, exactly. It has to be something true, right? And the mask just was ineffective. The data on the jab shows that it may have been helpful for some people, older people, but for most young people, and it didn't do anything to stop the spread, right? So, that's really what it was about. It didn't do anything to stop the spread, and neither did the mask. So there's really no argument to be made at this point that makes sense. And it's listening to propaganda that's 4 years old at this point that we know better now. We're living in the future. We've seen what's happened, and the critics were right. So, all the critics of the COVID policy have basically been vindicated in all the things. I know I certainly was one of them.
So our rights come from God. We both established that. So using that premise, if our rights come from God, why can't we have a flourishing society without government?
Well, I think we can have a flourishing society with a very limited government, right? I think that's going to be our goal, is to limit government, because government is something that its nature is restrictive. So we do need government for certain things to mediate disputes. So our tradition has built out systems to do that. When somebody's hurting somebody else, that's when government should be stepping in. So because what happens when that doesn't happen is people fight amongst themselves, and that's bad. We don't want that. So having the third party, having something that we all can agree on, is something that we've developed over time. And a limited social safety net's okay too. So a little bit doesn't hurt. It's an accomplishment of civilization. There's better ways to do it than just the government. But yeah, a limited government should be our goal.
Individuals like Ben Shapiro say, hey, in states where people have less welfare, there's actually people that get more donations to nonprofits that actually replace welfare to a certain extent.
Yeah, absolutely. So a thriving nonprofit charity sector is a great way to have more responsibility being placed on individuals, right? So I can look and say, hey, this charity is doing a great job. I'm going to put some bucks this way, as opposed to having tax dollars being taken to something that's completely irresponsible and bureaucratic, and the money's going to hire more employees and bureaucrats to make it more difficult to get the help to go where it actually needs to go. So the nonprofit sector is way more responsible because they're dependent on their donors. So that's a great thing.
So limited government, what does that mean?
Yeah, restrictions being placed on government, right? So and the size of government too, right? And so it's fueled by our tax dollars. And so we want to limit our taxes so that government's smaller, so it only does the things that it needs to, not the massive bureaucracy that forces us to do things that we don't want to do, like maybe wear a mask or take the jab. It's the most recent example. Also, like recently, the public education stuff. Like, so we see all the crazy stuff that's going on in our schools now. I don't think most people want that. So I think it's pretty easy to see that limiting the size of government and letting people make their own choices for themselves is the best answer.
Okay, so give me examples of, like, in America, there's a state that has a perfect structure of society, of government, and why, and how their citizens are happier than citizens in states that are more restrictive.
Yeah, nowhere's perfect, right? I mean, we have a massive federal government, and
I think a little too big, by the way. I think that the founding father does not want the federal government to be that big and so powerful.
This was definitely not the idea of the founders, right? They wanted a much smaller government, and this was it's somewhat always expected. This always happens in history where the size of government, democracy is very short-term focused. So the size of government is always growing. The Romans saw this, Athens saw this, every democracy sees this where it becomes, the government creeps more and more into the direction. I mean, there's states out there doing very well with stuff. New Hampshire is probably the best example of more freedom and the prosperity that comes from that. Florida is another one that does very well. Texas is an example of places where there's more freedom. And they do things in a little bit of a different way. Individual rights in New Hampshire is very important. Gun rights in Texas in a way that is an example of how there's more freedom there. Florida's economic stuff and immigration stuff, they've done very well. Keeping immigrants, like you're talking about, they've done a better job of integrating people in Florida. So there's lots of different examples of states doing well. But yeah.
I think it was Emmett, the Cuban that I was individual I was talking about on the poll worker. He had been in the U.S. for like 3 years, and he spoke perfect American English. I was actually shocked. So yeah, they're doing a really good job with that. So on gun rights, I travel the country, as you know, I do everything from fundraising to canvassing, knocking on doors, whatever, they need me for. I was talking to an individual at a door once, and he actually told me, he's like, listen, what do you think of South Carolina and the Second Amendment right, to carry guns, constitutional carry? And I was like, I think it's a good thing. And he's like, I don't think it's a good thing. He's like, the Constitution doesn't say that you have to be a specific age. What do you think of 10-year-olds carrying guns? So, I was like, well, I mean, in my mind, I was like, couldn't say this, but I was like, a 5-year-old can choose a gender, so why not? I couldn't say that. But what is your perspective on the fact that ever since 2020, I'm not going to name reasons why unless you want to, that increasing amount of states have been passing laws to bring back constitutional carry.
Yeah, it's a great thing, right? I mean, if we recognize that individuals fundamentally have a right to individual dignity, that means people can defend themselves on their own in the way that they choose to. And the reason we have the second,
if you're 5 years old too,
yeah, if you're 5, or the founders didn't say there couldn't be some restrictions. I mean, reasonable people can disagree on where there are restrictions. 5 might be a little too young, but hey, whatever. We can have a good discussion about that. But I think you hinted at this. The reason we have the Second Amendment isn't just for personal defense. It's also to protect us against a tyrannical government, right? I mean, that's something basic to our tradition, is that, hey, people have the right to protect themselves from the government too when the government gets out of control. Hopefully it never gets to that point, but that's something that the founders were insistent on.
So let's talk about the First Amendment. The Second Amendment exists to protect the First Amendment. You've seen the meme, right?
Yep.
The Second Amendment's like, yeah, I got your back. So,
yeah, we should flash that up on the screen, and that's a good one.
Well, maybe at some point, yeah, definitely. So, what is the relationship between freedom of expression and individual liberty?
Yeah, so I mean,
can you say in the cinema? Sorry to say that, bro. Sorry for you on the spot. Can you say in the movie theater, "Hate is fire"?
Well, that's harming other people, right? So there is a Supreme Court case that said, hey, if you're inciting people being harmed, your speech can't do that. That's not speech at that point. It becomes action.
So how come two different things? Which of the West? What's her name again? Maxine Waters can say, "Hey, when you see them in public, harass them." How come she can do that? Are they exempt? Yeah. Are they exempt from it? We're not.
No. I think listen. I don't like the cancel culture. I think it's on a cultural level that's bad, right? I don't want there to be a cancel culture. I think that open debate, good discussions are what powers our society. But on the government level, I don't want the government stopping people from being able to harass and protest. So that's something I don't want to have happen. So those are two different things, right? So as like adults, we can say, hey, you shouldn't do that. But also the state shouldn't be stepping in and saying that you can't do that. Those are should and can't are two different things.
I totally agree with you. I mean, personally, obviously we're not there yet, but I would have a person like Nick Fuentes. I'm Hispanic and Black and all that, but I don't really look at it. I'm like, hey, freedom of speech. If you want to say something, that's your choice. I'm not the person to tell you what you can or cannot say. But why do you think that it's okay for Maxine Waters to say that? But if I were to say the same exact thing about a Democrat, or you, especially, for obvious reasons, you might actually go to jail for that.
Yeah,
let's talk about that.
Yeah, well, our society is drifting. Our government, the size of government, has expanded massively. Right, this is the big danger of our times, is that we can't have free and open conversations. We saw that during COVID. We saw that that there's this big danger. The reason why we have free speech is to test ideas. So we need to be able to discuss things, prove people wrong. So maybe if somebody's saying something that's inappropriate, or I'm definitely not anti-racist, right? So there if there's something that's happening that's anti-racism, if I'm against racism, not the communist fake definition of it that they put in all the school books. You have to be able to say to somebody, hey, what you're saying is wrong, right? That's why we want to know. That's why one of the reasons why we want free speech is because we want to make sure that people that have the bad ideas can get corrected.
Yeah, free speech, super important. Maybe the most important thing, because that's what everything is based on. It's the most fundamental level. The founders put that as the First Amendment for a reason, because if we don't have free speech, we don't have anything.
Also, I would want to say one thing that I actually understood, like going on the topic of free speech. I speak Mandarin and a little Cantonese. The Eastern languages, at least the Chinese languages, seem to be focused on we
Right.
versus, like you said before, like Americans and the Western cultures are both focused on I and my family.
Right.
So I think that obviously impacts, how people perceive the world, because if you're always talking about us as a collective, you're always thinking about the collective.
Right. That's Confucianism right there at a fundamental level, and it reflects on every single aspect of society. And and one of the reasons why I think things are getting really weird in the world right now, like that there's this tension between the fundamental individual and the collective, right? So there's very powerful, very well-funded forces out there. The influence of the CCP at our universities has been unbelievably big. They had the Confucius Centers, right, across all these universities in America, and they have tons of money. The unions are funding things on the left. There's all kinds of powerful forces out there that are putting a lot of tension on society for more collectivism, and that's exactly what we don't want. Because we were the ones that were right? We saw that during the Cold War. We tried out these ideas in practice. We saw what happened. We beat the Soviets in the Cold War, and that was an amazing, incredible thing that happened. We were right. We won. We shouldn't have to do this again. We know the answer for a prosperous society, and it's focused on the individual.
Definitely. And I just want to add to what you were saying, like we were saying, in Japan, I saw a show one time, I think it was Discovery Channel, where they were basically saying, inmates, like if you believe and you really are truly innocent, how dare you not respect the collective and just say you're guilty so we can punish you, so we can move on as a society.
Yeah, I couldn't even imagine living like that, right? You have to deny the truth at that level. Couldn't even imagine living like that. For as much as society is drifting, as much as government is growing, I am still very glad to be an American and hear stuff like that. Oh, you're guilty before you even get started. It's just a shocking, crazy thing to hear the way other people live.
So where does freedom intersect with social equality and injustice and everything, all the protests and all that stuff?
Yeah, so I think freedom is the answer to the problems that the left points out. The left is, I'm going to give people on the other side some credit on this, is that they're very good at recognizing problems in society, right? But they're not good at presenting solutions, and they're not good at recognizing when those problems have gone away. I am very, very proud as an American that freedom started with only a tiny group of people, but massively expanded to everybody.
Happened like in small bars, right? People just talking like this. We're not planning anything, just in case anybody's listening. But
it was, it did happen over a few drinks, which is something that I love, right? But it happened very fast, right? In this short historical period over only a couple hundred years, where there was absolutely nobody free anywhere, to being everybody free in the most powerful country in the world. That's an amazing thing. Freedom answers these problems. Social justice, unfortunately, gets in the way because their solutions are wrong, right? Redistributing wealth, restricting people, it's not the answer. We've seen that. We know where that goes. And the size of government's always growing because that's the way governments work. They want to get bigger. They want more tax dollars. It's just a natural... It's just about the nature of government that it's always expanding. And it causes more problems than it solves.
So let's get back to cryptocurrency, because I think that's very important for freedom. I think that in the future, that's going to be the counterbalance to CBDC, central bank digital currencies, which I'm sure you're against. I'm against, and most people with common sense are against. So you talked about private conversation, but we can talk about this. Yeah. The financial sandbox that you guys are lobbying for. What is a financial sandbox in the cryptocurrency space, and how would that help society flourish?
Yeah,
Well,
so
Rhode Island specifically, since
yeah,
we're going to
so
focus on
so
Rhode
I
Island.
I advocate for ideas. I do a little bit of lobbying. It depends on your definition of lobbying, but I mostly talk to people and teach people about ideas. And lawmakers are somebody that we teach about ideas, and we do that through events, we do that through discussions, we do that through conversations. So there's no like, oh, people think of lobbying as we're going to give this politician X amount of dollars to do this thing. That's not how we do it all. So we talk to people, we educate them.
Thank you for clearing that up, by the
Right,
way.
yeah, so we educate people. That's what you and I do, and it's an amazing thing because a lot of lawmakers get into this because they want to make their home a better place. They care about their neighbors.
Not all,
Not
but
all,
most.
but a lot of them really
No pun.
do, and then they get corrupted by the system once they get in, right? And it's an unfortunate thing to see that happen. It's depressing that that they get all this pressure from people that don't want their best interest. They have their own interest in mind, and it's a sad thing to see. But it happens, and that's why the work we do is important. So on sandbox legislation, experimenting with things is a good idea, right? So that's how we learn. That's how we get better at things. So the idea of the sandbox is to create this little area for experimentation in a specific place where there's less regulation, there's less getting in the way.
Specific place meaning
Yeah, it can depend on the legislation, right? So hopefully it's Providence, right? That's what I'd love to see happen, where it's Providence that is this
like a small geographical area.
small
Is that what it is?
small geographical area,
Okay.
right? So this area where there's room for growth, right? So I would love to see that happen where there's just, hey, we can try this, we can try that, we can make all these things happen. We're going to say, hey, the government's not going to get in the way, and that can spread when they see the absolute success that it'll bring.
Yeah, but what? Like, okay, let's say I have a startup, which I
Yep.
do. Why would I want to move to that specific area when I can go to Florida or New Hampshire?
Well, like for you, for example,
Mm-hmm.
right? Your family's here. There's people you care about here. You have life here, and this is a place that I know I want to be because of those things.
I understand us. But I'm saying like more so like let's say you have a financial sandbox to attract the future Amazons, the future
Right.
Microsofts. Why would somebody from I don't know George Michaels from Michigan,
Yeah,
from Michigan, why would he want to move to Providence, Rhode Island for a little area?
Easy, they could save some bucks, right? So I mean, the costs could be lower, and with lower taxes and lower regulation, even the
So that financial sandbox means lower taxes?
well, it could be. I mean, that's not what the sandbox legislation is about. It's about regulation, but I mean, hey, a lower tax policy would be great too.
I know New York City did this in 2013, I believe. They were giving any startups or any companies that opened their doors 10 years of Bloomberg was mayor at that time, 10 years of no taxes.
Yeah, that's picking winners and losers, and that's probably not the best way of going about it. The best way is to just lower taxes across the board, and that's something that I'm always advocating for, right? So the sales tax is an example that's especially punitive to small businesses. We should just lower taxes across the board as opposed to saying, hey, this one versus the other. But, lower taxes in general is always the best way to do it. But regulations are just as expensive, just as onerous as taxes on businesses. So because it stops you from doing what you need to do, and you have to come up with that through cost, right? That's how businesses work. They run on money. You got to make peace with that, and the regulations add to cost. So I mean, it's all about lowering costs for businesses. And if we want to make that Rhode Island a place where it's really prosperous, that's what we have to do.
I like to say that traditional politicians and individual citizens, private citizens rather, like to say that politics ends at the water's edge, right? So for us libertarians, certain people like to say that's not necessarily the case. So what do you think of a proposal from, I can say, we're not endorsing any candidates or anything. President Trump wants to get rid of the IRS at the federal level and then wants to tax imports.
Yeah. So listen, a lot.
Well, we both
yeah.
like the getting rid of the income taxes.
Definitely like
Okay,
getting
now
rid-
let's talk
yeah.
about specifically
tariffs, right? So my personal opinion on this, and I disagree with a lot of other libertarians on this, is that we have a very hostile enemy in communist countries, and that tariffs are a better option than war, right? I mean, because fundamentally that their interests collide with ours.
a tax war is better than a hot war.
Exactly, right? So if they're a tool of foreign policy, it's a good thing, right? And I think that's Trump's argument in the end, right? That the Chinese do things to inflate their monetary system, way worse than the United States even, and that steals the value of the work that people are doing in China. So they have a complicated system where they inflate the currency just enough to make their standard of living raise very slowly. And that steals value from people because their money is worth less and they can buy less, and that forces them into exports, and that robs the American consumer. That's a very dangerous thing because it's a complicated thing, but it fundamentally, like you said, avoiding a hot war is better than, a monetary war is better than a hot war.
So before we go into hot wars around the world, there's a candidate for the Libertarian Party in the last gubernatorial election in the state of Rhode Island. Although it's a position at the state level, he had said that, hey, when you have those kind of tariffs, you start a tax war with a different country, you're hurting your own citizens. I think that's what you're talking about. What does that mean, and how would you counteract that argument?
Yeah, so it does hurt people. I mean, that's fundamentally something that does happen, right? It's going to cost people more when you put up tariffs, and it happens on both sides, but it's going to cost the other side more than it's costing your side. It means that there's less cheap goods coming into the United States when you do that, because it raises the cost of imports. So that it brings manufacturing and the standard of living can in fact raise because people have better jobs here in the United States. And that's the whole argument, right? That we want to have the jobs here as opposed to overseas.
So sanctions, tariffs, and sanctions. I believe that sometimes they're doing the same thing.
Yeah, I think fundamentally that they're two words for the same thing. And I think it's something that politicians use to kind of, depending upon what side you're on, it's just different words for making the same thing happen. I completely agree with you on that.
So sanctions on a country like Iran, for example, do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing? And does that curb, in your perspective as a libertarian, does that curb negative behavior, or does that add to the negative behavior or add to alliances with other bad actors?
Yeah, so there's an argument for economic interdependence where two countries are trading with each other that they won't go to war. And that's depending upon the circumstances, that's a very powerful argument, right? I'm not going to go to war with the guy that I'm selling my stuff to, and that's selling stuff to me because we're getting along, we're having a relationship. On the other side of that, though, is that there's huge human right abuses. There's tyrannical governments around the world. Those are fundamentally dangerous. They're not always rational. There can be a dictator that has, supreme power, and the reasons that they make decisions not always clear. So there's room for misunderstanding. So it's definitely a tool that we want to use to prevent war, because war is the worst possible thing. That's the absolute state of failure. We want to avoid that whenever we can. Sometimes you can't avoid it, but when you can, do everything you can to avoid it.
So I keep my ear to the streets. In this concept, in the context of what I'm saying here, this is my ear to DC, and I talk to lobbyists and stuff. I can't mention names, obviously. They're talking to a lot of generals and top brass in the military. World War III, you think it's imminent?
So we're definitely in a Cold War right now. So it depends how you define World War III. I think we're probably very close to we're in Cold War II, World War IV.
Well, I'm just going to say that,
right.
When you have missiles and military equipment that have the U.S. flag on them landing in Russia, and you have Russia saying, "Okay, we're going to put ships in Cuba,"
we are much closer than I am comfortable with right now, right? So,
you know where I'm getting into something with this. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we've made a lot of mistakes in our relationships with other countries. We've been inconsistent, especially in the Biden administration, of how we're dealing with things, and I think other countries sense that there's a weakness in the president right now. We were talking about tyrants. I'm not calling Joe Biden a tyrant, but where there isn't a rational decision-making process, President Biden may not be able to make those rational decisions because of his age. It's a very sad thing to see. But I think that we're much closer to war right now around the world than I'm comfortable with, and certainly something I'm worried about. So we'll see what happens.
So it's an age thing. So Trump shouldn't be president either. That's what you're saying.
I think it's mental capacity, right? So I'm not advocating for one or the other, but I think that it's very clear that President Biden has mental capacity, and everybody ages at different rates. It's not just a number, right? I take my vitamins every day, right? So maybe I'm aging a little slower. I think I look good, but it's definitely, it has to do with mental capacity, and it's up for the American voter to decide by viewing the candidates.
So as a libertarian,
liberty,
right?
yeah, liberty-minded,
liberty-minded person. Yeah,
because
small L,
right? Yeah.
Thanks. We both, small L. I get that. I want to make that very clear.
Go.
None of us are advocating for the Libertarian Party. We're small L libertarians, because at one point libertarians actually were Democrats, right? In the 60s, 70s. That's where it started. Then it migrated to the Republican Party when a certain party went a little bit too much to the left and government control. So libertarianism on the international stage, do you think that the U.S. basically right now has just basically leave NATO, leave like some libertarians think, leave all our alliances and just do what we did, before World War One and World War Two. We just kind of like, hey, World War One, I think it was. Let's leave the rest of the world to like you guys do whatever you want. We're not going to intervene in anything. We don't really care. Do you think that's a good foreign policy?
It would be nice to be able to afford to do that, right? But
But
after World War II, we have our hand in so many pots. The United States is still a stabilizing force across the world, and our geography makes it specific that it has to be the United States because we have the two massive oceans on each side, and we're a big country. There's no one else in the world that can do that.
Canada and Mexico are allies, I would say.
Right, exactly, right. We don't have to worry about an enemy to the north and south, right? They're not really a factor because they're basically under our protection. So the United States Navy is the only force in the world that can really be a stabilizing factor. It would be nice to be able to say, hey, we're free from foreign entanglements like the founders wanted. Just not the way the world is right now. And there's no good way out of that either, right? We can't just walk away because then there'll be chaos, right? So all the other countries in the world really depend on that stability provided by the United States. That gets back to monetary policy. Why the United States dollar is the monetary policy of the world. It's because of the backing of the United States Navy.
So inflation, what can we do as libertarians to fight back against inflation besides investing in cryptocurrency, not financial advice?
That was going to be my answer, right? We have
Okay,
to,
go ahead. I mean, that's financial advice, but go ahead.
It's not financial advice, but we have to look for new solutions, right? And cryptocurrency is a new technology that's emerging to store value and transfer value in a way that really hasn't been possible before. So looking for those new ideas is what freedom is about, what markets are about, and making that happen is something that pro-freedom people should want to have happen, right? I want people to have their own property and not dependent upon something else.
Yeah, our producer Adam was shaking his head, so I think he agrees. But anyway,
The annihilator.
definitely. So besides cryptocurrency, like, what do you think? Barter system's good. I know, like, I was talking to somebody in Texas whose family's from Mexico, and they were like, yeah, back in 30 years ago, people used to have their farms. They used to trade cow milk for eggs. Carrots for potatoes. Can we even go back to something like that? Because I feel like a place like New York City, specifically, my personal opinion, we're so ingrained and so used to supermarkets and the government control that if there's a pothole in the street, we're gonna be like, oh my God, the government has to come fix it. We can't just fix it ourselves.
Yeah, so this is something that I know you and I both care a lot about because of the organizations we're involved in. Community is super important, right? That's something that we care. We have a lot of friends. We all rely on each other. If something goes wrong, we'll throw a couple bucks in the hat, or we'll show up for each other on things that it matters, right? So everybody should be building that community around themselves so that they're less dependent upon other things.
Entrepreneurship. You have an event coming up, hopefully soon, July, right? So entrepreneurship and how it leads, how that's a good breeding ground for libertarianism, for individual liberty and all that.
Yeah, I think this goes back to something we've talked a lot about avoiding dependence, right? So people want to avoid dependence because it's good. There's natural value, self-esteem that comes from doing things yourselves and making good things happen. We have a great thing coming up in New York in July about crypto and blockchain and high technology and entrepreneurship in the Black community, especially in Harlem. I'm very excited about that event. And it's skipping steps, right? So maybe since there's people that for whatever reason haven't had opportunity, there's a new opportunity emerging. Now's the time to grab it. So let's go talk about it.
Definitely. Silicon Harlem. Hopefully that's a good event I can make
July
as well.
18th.
Great. Yeah, definitely. So tickets on sale soon, hopefully. Like next
Yes,
week.
absolutely.
Okay, so another complex topic. You can't support anybody for president, but what are some characteristics that you would say people should consider when they're, without endorsing anybody openly, people should consider when they're electing the next president, when they go, to the ballot box in November?
Yeah, this is a great way of putting it. Nonpartisan guy, but I think it's important to recognize what's going on in our country right now. People are very upset. They're very concerned about the direction we're going. I think everybody feels it like on a fundamental level in their bones that there's something wrong and that, there's this creep of government, this collectivism that's infiltrated America in some way, shape, or form. So we should be looking for somebody that challenges the system as opposed to being part of the system. And I think that's something that people are responding to. There's a lot of anger out there. So we should be looking for somebody that embraces the ideas of freedom. It doesn't have to be perfect. No politician is, but we should be looking for somebody that believes in the dignity of the individual, fighting for the little guy, and willing to make some change because things aren't quite right now, and that needs to happen.
Okay, so why do you think that Hispanics and Black Americans are becoming more liberty-minded in the past? Like, have you noticed that in the past, like, 4 years, especially the past, like, 2 years?
Yeah, it's incredible, right?
Yeah.
This is like the most amazing, best thing that's happening, right? It's something I hope, this is something you and I have been working on making happen. We've been going to a lot of places, talking to a lot of people, doing stuff like this. And I think that there's more information, right? It's easier to get this information. The streaming stuff the podcasting stuff is something that's brand new, right? So we're in a printing press moment where people have access to more information. People on the right are more willing to show up to those communities and actually talk to them. And I think that COVID made things very clear, right? So I think that Blacks and Hispanics saw during COVID that the overreach of government is a bad thing.
I don't even just think it was, like, necessarily COVID. It was the fact that we've had 2 different administrations, and we've seen the contrast. One
Right.
is more, like, liberty-minded, where it's less red taped open businesses. I've seen it personally. Obviously, I love Rhode Island. I love every state in America. I'm American. But there are certain states where it's easier, like Elon Musk, right? What did he do? He took his Delaware registration.
South African, he's not black, but he's South African.
He's African American. Even though I don't like the term African American personally, I don't like that term. It was a made up term by
Yeah.
like the reverends in the '80s. They were like, "Hey, how do we divide people?
Right, yeah.
African American."
Yeah.
That was a made up term, but
Right, the black people I know call themselves black. It's like
yeah, Black American.
Right.
Yeah, you don't see that in other countries. You don't go to Colombia and somebody like I'm Afro-Colombian or I'm
Right,
Afro-Dominican. It's like I'm Dominican,
Right.
But anyway, like I definitely saw that like there's certain states that are more liberty-minded and just easy to open a business. I think I heard a story where Elon Musk left California because he wanted to build a factory. It only took him 10 years with all the red tape and everything in California. And in Texas, it took him 10 months. From the moment that he decided to move.
Unbelievable, right? And this is something I really value about Black Americans and Hispanic Americans.
And Elon Musk.
Right, and Elon Musk, right?
Who was a Democrat too?
He-
Democrat
he-
became a Republican.
right?
But,
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
he's his own entity at this point,
Yeah.
right? He's got his own political party. I'm a fan. But one of the things I love is the entrepreneurship, right? That's something that's very valuable. It's a cultural value too. That there's that drive to start something new, to try new things. It's something I really respect, and I think it really lines up with liberty values. So I think that people are waking up to that. Seeing that awakening is awesome. It's fun to be, it's a fun thing to be part of at this moment.
Definitely. So before we just get going, because I know you're a busy man and you have things to do, and also we have events coming up this weekend.
Yeah, it's going to be a great event. I hope everybody comes out, but there's more. So we're always doing events every single month. Whenever you're watching this, we have the great event coming up this weekend at the Lippet House in Providence, Rhode Island. It's going to be great. So go on our website, find that, americasfuture.org, join our Telegram channel, meet us on Facebook, send me an email at lawrence@americasfuture.org. There's really cool stuff coming up. It's it's always great. And Mike's you're a huge part of our community. And
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
yeah, hey, listen, you are a driving force, man. We believe in individual responsibility, and without you, I know probably about 30% of the stuff that we do wouldn't happen. So I'm
Very kind of you.
extremely grateful for you, and we got a great team of people around us with similar values. And we have fun, and we have a few drinks. It's a great thing. We have great conversations like this.
And again, the only reason I really go to the events is because of the peanut butter whiskey.
That peanut butter whiskey is extremely
That's why I
powerful.
promote the events.
It's something we found that was extremely powerful. It is delicious. It's a great drink. Nice. I just have it straight. It makes everything a little bit even more fun and a little bit more free.
So any last words you want to say, or any organizations besides AF you want to promote, or donor pages, or anything we can put on our YouTube channel?
Yeah, there's lots of great stuff happening. OceanStateGuard.com is a great resource for people that want to know about stuff that's happening here in Rhode Island. This is going to be on there. There's so many great things that you can look at there, finding out about what's going on. The work we're doing at the center is extremely important. But yeah, so I mean, listen, we rely on the support of people out there, the regular people that are willing to throw a few bucks into that to make this stuff possible. So it's always good for that. But mostly, I want people to get involved, make a difference, and say what they think, and America will be a better place.
Definitely. I appreciate you coming on. And with that said, please subscribe and support and like, and upward and onwards. We're out.